Good have it on.
Good, how are you? So what you have in front of here, Cindy, can you see everything and you're connected now?
Yes, I can see everything.
Okay, thanks. Cindy, can you say something again?
Yep, I sure can. Can you not hear me?
We can hear you. It's just that we're also hearing us talking like 10 seconds later. We were, and maybe we're not now.
I don't think we are now.
I might have
It
had
looks
Zoom.
like it's on now,
Yeah,
watching you move around.
okay. I think we're okay now.
Are you still hearing yourselves?
No, now we're not. So it's whatever I did, I don't know what I did. And then how do we get the full, well, we just need your screen pulled up, so, okay, thank you.
Is it better now, Bill?
Yeah, we're fine now.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Now my mic's not working.
There you go.
I have 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the June 15th, Credit River Planning Commission meeting to order. If we could all rise and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. We have all the commission members should receive a copy of tonight's agenda. We have 2 items on the agenda for this evening. 2 public hearings. The first public hearing will be for a variance request to permit a home to be developed on a property that hasn't been platted yet and that does not contain the minimum frontage required on a public road. The PID number for that property is 0493-30050. The second public hearing is related to the Rancho Credit River Second Edition and a variance request to permit the subdivision to be constructed without the inclusion of a trail that is required by the city's subdivision ordinance. Would any commission member like to add or amend anything to tonight's agenda?
No.
Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion by Amy to approve it. Do I have a second? Seconded by Thane. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion to approve tonight's agenda is carried. We will move right into the public hearings. Our first public hearing tonight is for a variance request to permit a home to be developed on the property without platting and which does not contain the minimum frontage required on a public road. All commission members should have received or have received and had a chance to review a staff memo dated June 15th from City Planner Nash, a new home survey of the property, a memo from Jacobson Engineering to the City of Credit River regarding drainage, a drainage narrative related to hydrology and ponding for the proposed house on the lot. An existing watershed schematic prepared in March 2022 by Jacobson Engineering. The proposed watershed schematic also prepared in March 2022 by Jacobson Engineering. And then tonight you all received a memorandum from Shane Nelson, our city engineer, to City Planner Nash regarding this property and his comments that we will incorporate into the record tonight as well. So before I open a public hearing, I'd like to have City Planner Nash summarize the variance being requested. Cindy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicants have applied for a new variance to construct a home on their property. The property is the one here that is outlined in red on the screen. It's at the southern end of Carbridge Court. Zoom in a little bit here on Carbridge Court so you can see some of the items we'll be discussing. So Carbridge Court, to anybody going out there, Carbridge Court looks like a pretty permanent cul-de-sac, but you can see the right-of-way lines actually go through the cul-de-sac here. It's actually a temporary cul-de-sac, and this road's meant to be extended at some point in the future. That said, it obviously has a boulevard area within it with landscaping, and it looks for practical purposes like it's almost a permanent cul-de-sac. The properties surrounding the applicant's property to the west is where this would really want to go, as per some previous review that we had done with the city engineer a couple of years ago when the applicants had previously applied. But the properties to the west and the south are both cellular tower uses at the moment. And obviously none of us can predict the future to know what's going to happen with cell towers. Are they going to be there forever, or, will this property be able to be redeveloped in the future at some point when perhaps that type of use goes away. So we do have that plan for this to be extended. And back in 2021, the town board at the time had looked at a variance for this property and granted one that would allow for them to build on this property with some conditions that would bring this up now, would preserve that future ability for a road to be extended if there ever was a need to extend it. So they're showing a right of way to be preserved in this location coming through. The house would then be constructed in a location that would be the required setback off of that right away. And it would ultimately flow in terms of, you know, how it aligns with the rest of the neighborhood that already exists. At the same time, it was deemed reasonable back then not to require the construction of the road at that time, given all of the uncertainties with the cellular towers to the south and to the west of this property. The ordinance does have two requirements. One is that plating has to be required before anybody can build on a parcel. And the second is that you have to have the minimum lot width at the on the frontage and at the building line. So going back to the aerial photo, you can see that their frontage on a right-of-way is just the 66 feet wide, where it kind of stubs in, which does not meet the city ordinances for that at this point in time. If this right-of-way is ever extended, certainly they would have enough frontage on the right-of-way. But right now, the only other option would be to take this cul-de-sac out, bring it into their property, rebuild it just a little bit to the south of where it is right now. And at the same time, still only gaining the one lot at this point in time. So they were not able to use their variance before it expired last time. Variances are only good for 1 year. And so they have now reached a point where they did all of the work that was required, or most of the work that was required of their last variance. There's still a couple items that we're still reviewing and are included as conditions again in the draft recommendation. But they've submitted their building permit, they've designed the home, and they're generally ready to move forward with this in a manner that would, if granted, you know, that they could do so within the time frame of a new variance expiring again. The city engineer did review the plans, and a copy of their memo is presented in front of you. They did have a couple of comments related to stormwater management that would need to be addressed. These are comments that would not need to hold up your review this evening. They could certainly be contained as a condition of something that would be addressed prior to this being placed on a city council agenda. So we would be asking them to make those revisions so that we could review those and then present it to the city council. With that, there's a number of conditions contained that are recommended in the packet. They track the conditions pretty closely that were approved back in 2021. Happy to answer any questions that you have. And I don't think the applicant was able to attend this evening. I think they're watching on YouTube, but they're not able to participate directly in the meeting.
Is Mr. and Mrs. Perkins here tonight? No, okay, so they are watching. Thank you, Cindy. Commissioners, any questions before I open up the public hearing to Cindy? No? Okay. So I'm going to open up the public hearing now. This is related to the variance request for PID number 0493300050. I asked Cindy earlier, we did not receive any written comments from any residents. Are there any residents here tonight that would like to step up to the podium and make comments related to this variance request? Any residents would like to make any comments to this request? Let's go one more time. Any residents want to make any comments related to this request? Very well. Hearing no comments, I would like to get a motion to close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I'll make it.
Motion to close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Cal. By the way, the motion is presented by Steve Wolf. I have a second by Cal Casey. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion to close the public hearing is carried. I'll ask again, planning commission members, any questions, comments related to this application?
No.
I think it's pretty straightforward. It's been approved before. There's a couple additional conditions, and maybe I'll just read them since the residents haven't seen this yet either.
Yeah.
Related to the stormwater management, here's what it says from Shane Nelson, our city engineer's memo. And this will be posted on our website eventually. The culvert located under the proposed driveway will lower the outflow elevation of the existing wetland. This may drain a portion of the wetland, which would require a wetland replacement plan. Additionally, there would be a change in drainage characteristics that is not included in the provided HydroCAD model. Please adjust the culvert such that the runout elevation of the wetland is not changed or provided or provide a replacement plan and updated stormwater models. That was the first condition. The second one was the northern rain garden, parenthesis 4P, parenthesis, appears to be located within the proposed right of way for the extension of Carbridge Court. Please revise the design such that the rain garden is not located within the proposed right of way. So those are the two additional conditions from our city engineer that we would like to put into the record tonight. So hearing that, the commission, no other commission members have any other comments or concerns, can I get a motion to approve this variance request? Subject to the conditions in the staff memo from Cindy Nash, as well as the conditions reflected in the city engineer Shane Nelson's memo. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Amy. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Steve. All in favor of indicating, and by the way, we are recommending approval to the city commission. We are not approving it. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
All right.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you. So our second public hearing tonight is for a variance request submitted by the developer for the Ranch of Credit River Second Edition for a subdivision to be constructed without the inclusion of a trail required by the city's subdivision ordinance, and which was one of the conditions for approval outlined in City Council Resolution number 2023-14 that was approved on May 1st of this year. Commission members have received a staff memo prepared by City Planner Nash dated June 15th, a preliminary plat for the Ranch of Credit River Second Edition, and that schematic is dated November 4th, 2022. Before I open the public hearing, I'd like to have City Planner Nash summarize the variance request that's before us. Cindy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When the Ranch at Credit River Second Edition came before the City Council for approval of their preliminary plat, there was some significant discussion about the trail and the need for a trail within that plat. It was a comment that had been within staff comment memos previously, but had not been addressed by the developer. And then while we were having the meeting, the developer expressed their concerns that they did not want to construct the trail. They're definitely concerned about having the HOA have to maintain a trail potentially, similar to how the trails are maintained in the Territory neighborhood. And some general discussion about whether a trail was needed or not had occurred at that meeting. What the City Council did do to be able to approve the preliminary plat that evening, but maybe punt the decision on this trail piece off to the future a little bit, was to include a condition in the preliminary plat resolution that said the following: developer shall provide a trail as discussed in the staff memo that shall be constructed at developer's sole expense and shall be maintained by the homeowners association, unless determined differently by the city at the time of approval of the final plat. The location and composition of the trail shall be subject to the approval of the city. So that allowed some time, or some opportunity, I should say, but during that time frame between when the preliminary plat was approved and when the developer may submit their final plat, for some continued discussion and resolution of that concern. That resulted in this variance request being applied for that you're hearing this evening. The city's ordinances do require that the trails be installed. The comprehensive plan for for this part of the community, I'm just going to scroll down and show a map that was in the packet that shows what the comprehensive plan shows. So the subject property that we're talking about for the Ranch at Credit River is generally right here. And the Parks and Trails future map that's in the comprehensive plan shows a park search area that's on some property that's generally to the north of the existing first edition of the Ranch at Credit River, and then shows trails that connect from these trails that are in the existing trails in the Territory neighborhood up through the plat that was previously approved for Territory 5th edition that's not yet constructed. That plat had the trail going off this way and then connecting in with where the road connection would be into the Rancho Credit River. But then generally the trails, intended as per this red line to go up towards this park search area. Now, anything on this map that's in the future is a search area. It's not a specific alignment, but it's meant to show that general connection. Areas where where a trail or a park or something is hoping to be at some point in the future. That's always subject to what really occurs at the time of development in terms of what's the best layout and trying to figure out how those connections can be weaved through a development at the same time. There's several different portions of the subdivision regulations that talk about when the trails need to be constructed, which is basically at the time that the development goes through, that require compliance with the comprehensive plan. And so this is one of the not very many locations currently within the city where there is a trail search corridor and park search corridor shown. And again, basically requires the installation at the time of development. There was some discussion at the council level about could the trail potentially be a corridor be preserved for it and constructed at a later time. The city engineer and myself would recommend to the city that it's challenging to install infrastructure such as sidewalks and trails into neighborhoods after the fact, after it's been constructed. Even if land's preserved for the trail, property owners do typically resist having a trail be installed where there wasn't one before. Typically, when they're installed at the time the development originally occurs, people who choose to purchase on those lots, since they know there's already a trail there, are much more accepting of that trail being in that location. The criteria for granting variances is included in your packet with our staff notes on how this request may or may not meet the finding requirements. And basically, because of what those finding requirements are for our estimation, we are recommending denial of the variance due to those factors and the information contained within our staff memorandum. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Mr. Spellman, would you like to make a statement or address anything that Cindy has mentioned?
Yeah, good evening, Chairman and planning commissioners. We got 2 trails in Credit River and a couple of developments. Maybe there's a third, but these are open space design developments with smaller lots that were done some years back. I did one myself and I put a trail in, but it was an open space. It was not near any of the houses in front of them or behind them. Now, in this type of development that I got, I would think the trail may have to go in front of the houses where they have a 400-foot wide front, most of the 2.5 acre lots. And it would go no place. I don't have a park, I don't have a clubhouse, and this park may not come about for many, many years. So I'm saying, what is the purpose of the trail? When we are low density, people can walk on the road and have no problem. Now, I've done quite a few developments in Credit River. It's the nicest township in the state or city now. And I did between 200 and 300 lots. And there was not one person that asked me that they wanted a trail or wish they did have a trail. They want their privacy. They come from the city. Most of these people, they don't want another trail in front of their house like they got it. Small lot city development. So I'm asking to approve this variance tonight. And let's just like to say one more thing. I'm just wondering why I am not, maybe I am, grandfathered in by having my first phase approved without trails. And now I do my second and third phases, and they're talking about putting trails in there. So is this development not grandfathered in to have no trails. Because my first phase, then they came with the ordinance after my first phase, and now they're saying I gotta start putting trails in. They're asking when that ordinance came about, I have no idea, I never heard about it until this.
When was the first phase?
First phase was completed, year and a half ago.
So our subdivision ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, Cindy, because I looked that up. I thought it was like September 20, or it was 2020. Is what I thought the date.
It is, and the ordinance was in place then. The difference is that the preliminary plat for his first phase only showed the lots for the first phase. And so we knew that the logical corridor would be more to the west of that. And this corridor where basically this road is right now, obviously is showing up here in the second phase. So their original preliminary plat did not include all of the lots.
I just like to bring an example up similar to what I'm talking about as far as being grandfathered in. Now, there's a great development out there called Terra Farms. They started that development before these ordinances came into play. And now they are starting their third phase. But count of these ordinances, I had to do an EAW and a traffic study. So I'm not saying there's a thing wrong with Terra Farms, but I'm asking, they're starting the third phase. It's similar to my situation. Why are they not doing a traffic study and an EAW? I don't think they need one. But it's the same thing. They were grandfathered in on their development, so they do not have to do some of the things that are in this ordinance currently.
Here, so I can answer that.
Let Cindy maybe address that. Cindy?
So Terra Farm is completely different. It was preliminary platted by the county before our ordinance came into place, and they preliminary platted their entire property at one time. So now they've been applying for final plats for the phases as they go along.
So that's my position.
Okay.
And
Great. Cindy, can you address traffic, like, not traffic? How many houses would or residents that are around that new park that eventually will, at least in our comp plan, is proposed to go? I mean, how many residents do you think, or homes or properties that would possibly, use this trail to connect to the park?
We're not exactly sure how many would. The park is envisioned to be a larger park, not like a neighborhood tot lot kind of park that just serves people, say, within a walking distance of the area. There are only a couple locations really that seemed suitable when the city did its comprehensive plan. I'm going to go back to that map.
And Cindy, would you say it's common that cities they do plan ahead and they put in trails to things that aren't there yet? Because like you said earlier, that it's very hard once people have their homes and they have their landscaping in and all that stuff, and then the city comes in and they're going to put a trail on their lot. So it's better to do it now, even though it's not going to anywhere, but it's going to at some point in time.
Yeah, it's very difficult to go through and do, say, your whole trail network at one time after everything's already in place. So the most common thing is to put in pieces of it as development occurs. And some of those pieces might take a while to connect to something else, or to make that full connection of where the ultimate vision is of where they are trying to connect from and to. So it's very common. And then the other time that the trails end up being installed are typically with road reconstruct projects. So when a city might go in and do a new road reconstruct project on a street is a time when they might add sidewalks or trails in the future as well.
Okay.
And make some of those missed connections maybe that are missing along the way.
And in your experience, is it common for homeowners association to maintain trails that are in their subdivisions?
That is a mix. So if it's meant to be more of a trail that is connecting between places for the public to enjoy, it's much more common for it to be a city-owned and maintained trail. And then certainly if it's a trail that's going through, interior within a development through some open space areas, maybe providing access to, a private amenity within a neighborhood, that those types are certainly maintained by HOAs.
And our subdivision ordinance today doesn't really address though. The situation when the city owns it and maintains it.
The subdivision ordinance sort of does address it. So within the ordinance, it says as part of one of the sections related to trails, it says at the discretion of the city council, trails may be either publicly or privately owned and maintained. And, that discussion in this case especially is certainly something that, would warrant some additional discussion by the city council.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Do you have anything else before I open up?
Well, I'm just saying that if these trails gotta be maintained by somebody, and my association does not want to maintain a trail.
Right.
And I just think it's something that's not necessary. There's no purpose for it. And it's invasion of privacy. These people come out here to this city to get away from the trails and such that they put up with in the cities.
Mhm.
And they want their space.
Mhm.
They don't need somebody with a bike driving in front of their house. It's just doesn't make sense.
It's not going anywhere today, but it might be in the future. According to our comp plan, it's going to go to a park in the future unless we change our comp plan.
Why can't they take the road to the park?
A lot of parents with children on bikes maybe want them to use a
They
trail as
ride on
opposed to
the
a road.
roads anywhere, all they're gonna use the trail. But
Okay,
anyway.
all right, great. Could you stick around
Right.
if you want to address any other comments from
Yeah,
residents?
I'm not gonna go anyplace.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm now going to open up the public hearing related to this variance request. This is a time for residents to provide comments pertaining to it. Once again, I talked to Cindy. I don't believe we received any written comments. Are there any residents here tonight that would like to speak on this variance request? If you could step to the podium, write your name and address and state your name too.
Yes, I'm Lori Chenard.
And make sure that is the green light on there, by the way. I hope it was one. There it
Is that
is.
better?
Yep,
Okay.
good. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Lori Chenard and I live in the territory and I'm on the board and I'm the messenger. So, of course, the territory is asking for no variance because it will be going through our development. And yes, our homeowners pay for our trails and it's very expensive. In fact, we just got them all retired again. And obviously, it costs, thousands of dollars to do all those trails. And this development will be going through our trails. And just like you did with Reverence, that's the one that I don't know how many were here for that. They, I think, tried to do the same thing, but had to follow the rules. And now it's been going great. And by the way, I just want to say I love trails. And that's why I moved into territory, honestly, not even the pool. So there are people that love trails and walking their dogs and animals and bikes, but having another development go through our trails, if it ends, they will use them. I'm a runner. So, it just is wear and tear. And I agree with you why you have this rule. I don't even think I need to argue that. But that's where the homeowners association stands.
Could I ask you a question?
Yes.
Do you allow non-homeowners in territory to use your trails? Like if I was running, could I?
Yeah,
I won't get-
we do. I mean, we don't stop people and say you can't run here, you
is
can't
there a
walk
sign that
here.
says it's
No, there isn't, but we deal with a lot of, like, we just decided on our trails, we just had them redone and we are putting lines. We deal with our own kids with their golf carts and the golf carts aren't allowed on there. And I know that's not what we're talking about, but we're having to police a lot of stuff. Dog poop. I mean, we could go on, so yes, there's people on there that are not, but it's mostly homeowners. I mean, I have a dog too, and I'm probably on there 4 days a week. Okay. So it's mostly homeowners and Reverence. We share it now. And so, and it's worked out great. So that's where our association stands.
Okay,
Any other
thank you
questions?
very much.
Okay,
No,
you're welcome.
Thank you. Is there any other residents that would like to comment? Sure, sir, if you could step up, state your name.
Well, first off, thanks to the commissioners for the chance to comment. I'm Gear Friso. And I remember when I first moved to Minnesota, I was really surprised with the lack of sidewalks anyways in most communities. And the realtor who was showing me different homes pointed out all the trail system, and I was frankly quite impressed with those trail systems. I know I have several friends who live in communities with trails. They really like them. They enjoy them. They feel like it's a safe place for them to walk. It's a safe place for their children to be off the streets. So it also provides a sense of community for people to have that trail to walk and to meet their neighbors and get to know other people. So, and I think that's the reason why cities put this requirement in their plans and make it a requirement for developers. It's something that enhances the community and makes the community better. So I think granting this variance undercuts the whole reason for having that rule or having that comprehensive plan. So I think having a trail would be a tremendous addition to the ranch, and it would enhance that neighborhood.
Great. Where do you live? Where'd you?
I'm just across the street from the ranch.
Okay.
So
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Is there any other residents that like to come and speak tonight?
Hi, everybody. Tina Mishka, 16331 Creekwood Drive. So Cindy, can you put up the concept plan again?
The future?
No, the other one,
Okay, that one. Or the future map.
the future map.
Give me 1 second.
Okay.
This one?
Yeah. So that was done when again?
This is part of the comprehensive plan, so it was done at the time that was adopted.
When?
2018-19 when it was adopted,
2018,
yeah.
19. Okay. And then this master plan again was driven by like the Met Council, correct?
No, certainly some elements are driven by the Met Council if it's a regional park or trail amenity. Those items are driven by the Met Council. So there's certain things that are included in here that have to be related to Cleary Lake and Murphy Hanrahan, along with these two broad sweeping yellow and red search corridor areas. Those are related to a couple of regional trails.
Okay.
Anything that's a local trail is completely up to the discretion of the city.
Okay, so the yellow and the red are areas where you want to also put trails or parks? What is that?
Yeah, so like this big yellow one, for example, is a very large search area for a regional trail.
Okay,
Which was requested to put in there by the Met Council.
Yes, required to put in there by the Met Council.
okay. And do we have any?
Trails were,
Go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry, regional trails and regional parks are items that they require us to show in certain locations. And our plans in those cases have to match the regional plan along with the county's plan and neighboring communities in terms of connection points. But again, all of the local connections, we can put wherever we want.
Okay, so it's the regional, like in Murphy Hanram, are those all regional trails then? Right now?
So in like Murphy Hanrahan, where all of these small red lines are, those are existing trails that are local within Murphy Hanrahan, local to the park system.
But they're maintained by the park district, not by the city, correct?
They're maintained by the park district, yes.
Okay, and then what about around Cleary Lake?
Same. Those are maintained as part of the Clear Lake Park.
Okay. All right. I just would say I see both points to people tonight, but personally, like I have two small children and where I live, and I grew up in big subdivisions and the roads were wide. And if I would move out, I would want that privacy. So I understand the beauty of trails and stuff, but I also live really close to Murphy Hanoram. And if I was going to purchase 2.5 acres plus, I don't want to have to worry about what's happening behind me with strangers for my children's sake. So that is my 2 cents, and just trying to understand again how all this is driven, and also how what part of the city gets to approve. So you guys get to approve where these trails are going to be put, in the front or back, right? Is that correct?
I believe that's up to the city and the developer to decide.
Okay.
Right now, it's my understanding that the proposed placement of the trail would be along the proposed road A, I think, right where she's showing her little pointer there.
Correct.
So it's more, to me, I was wondering, why isn't that a sidewalk? But it's a trail.
So it's a trail right by the road?
Road,
Yes,
Okay, and that's in the range.
right.
that is
Right
the second edition.
Okay,
It's not there today.
okay, because I've been in the first edition and the roads are pretty wide, so. But,
Mhm.
and then we don't have an idea who maintains them yet, right? It would either be the city or an HOA.
Well,
correct?
today in our ordinance, it says the HOA, but
No,
it's
the
at the
word-
discretion of the city council. Trails may be either publicly or privately owned and maintained. That's in our ordinance.
Okay, so that would be decided before they actually have to build it.
Well, that's what's in our ordinance, and what was approved for the preliminary plat was that a trail would be created and then maintained by the HOA. That's what was in the approved preliminary plat, correct, Cindy?
It is, but with a little bit of language that provides some flexibility for the council to make a different decision, because what it says is that unless determined differently by the city at the time of the approval of the final plat, so
Thank
they
you.
could certainly decide to maintain it as a city instead at that point.
Yes.
Okay. So then any other future development, we would have to do trails? Is that what we're gonna be saying?
Only talking about this tonight, so
Okay.
I don't want to get into
Okay.
other situations.
All right.
Any other comments?
Very good.
Great, thank you very much. Hey, Ted?
Mr. Chair, Bill, how you doing?
Good.
Ted Kowalski, I live in Spring Lake Township, and I'm a developer here. I develop Terra Farms, and we're gonna be doing the Yellowstone. We just made our first submission. And I think this trail discussion, I don't know that, I didn't realize they changed the ordinance just recently. You guys became a city, and the big mantra was nothing's gonna change. None of these neighborhoods in Credit River have trails in them. Crestview doesn't have trails, Gray Fox doesn't have trails, Terra Farms doesn't have trails, Harvest Hills doesn't have trails. Scottsview, Scottsdale, all those neighborhoods, none of them have trails. Everybody loves Credit River the way it is, but all of a sudden we're changing stuff. Here's what I would like you to think about a little bit. Credit River is really two cities. Credit River north of 185th and Credit River south of 185th. North of 185th, that's going to be really developed more urban, you know, between 3 and 5 units to the acre. Okay, south of 185th, it's 1 lot for every 2.5 acres about. Okay, so if we compare the two, if you were to take a quarter section, a 40-acre piece of ground, which is about 1,300 feet by 1,300 feet square, that'd be 40 acres. In the south part of Credit River, that would yield you between 10 and 13 lots with 2.5 acre zoning. Okay, so 10 or 13 lots. North of 185th, if you got 3 units to the acre, it's 120 homes. If you got it to 5 units to the acre, it's 500 homes. Okay. My point is the trail that you hear about, all this trail stuff from these planners, is mostly all done in urban areas, because with the density that we have out here, now think about this, we got maybe 10 or 12 homes on a 40-acre parcel. We need a trail for that kind of traffic. And if it's traffic that's transient, that's moving through that area from other parts of Credit River, I think it's really unequitable to tell those property owners to pay for a public utility Why don't you make us pay for the roads that we dedicate to you? Why don't you make us put pools in that the homeowners association pays for, that the whole public gets to use? If the city wants a trail system, you should be responsible for maintaining it, not a specific number of homeowners that have to pay for a trail system that the whole general public gets to use. That doesn't seem equitable to me. If you guys had a pool in your backyard and I show up there some morning and I'm floating around in your pool, and I say, well, you got any coffee? Right? That ain't right. So sometimes this stuff doesn't translate right. Here's the other thing I'd like you to think about. I was in Terra Farms just the other night, driving in there to show a lot to a customer, and I had to really slow down because there was kids in the road with their skateboards, they were on bicycles, they were walking their dogs, people were out walking, people were doing their landscaping. That's a neighborhood. I'll challenge you that the county road system is meant to be driven faster and through traffic. When you get on, okay, you're a city, you're not a township anymore. When you get in the city road system, those are glorified driveways. Those are taking you to your home. If you build that road through Bill's neighborhood and you move pedestrian traffic off of it, people are going to drive that road faster. And I'll make the case that it makes the road more unsafe. That's part of the problem. When you make it so people can drive it fast and they know there's nothing going to slow them, they're going to drive it. Yeah, you can post it 10 miles an hour. They're going to drive it what they feel comfortable with. So I think this trail that you're putting in for the number of houses that are going to be on it it's going to be way underutilized. And you're going to spend more money maintaining it than it's going to get used for. Even adding the people to the territories. The territory trails are very nice, but they're neighborhood. It's a neighborhood trail system. What they just passed in May, if that's when it got passed, is news to me. And I guess I don't know what else I can say. Any questions? Can I answer anything?
In the Yellowstone, Cindy, is part of that trail go through Ted's new development? Did you say?
So, yeah, let me pull up, give me a second here.
Because was it in one of your conditions then too?
No, we don't have a plat yet.
Oh,
We
you don't-
will-
you don't
I'll
have
tell you
that.
straight up, we will not maintain a trail that's used for public. That is a slippery slope. We are still in America and you don't get to carry a burden for the general public on personal property. People, if a trail was a good idea, you wouldn't have to require it. I would do it. If customers were coming to me asking for it, I would do it. People think, well, the developer doesn't want to do it, it's going to cost more. No, whatever it costs, I put a markup on that and I make money when I sell it. If customers want something, we'll do it. Bill, do you want the public in your backyard? No, you don't. None of us do. I could take a poll. Who wants the public in their backyard? Nobody wants public in their private. And with the densities that we have out here, one house for every 3 or 4 acres, because you can't really get to 2.5. The septic ordinance says you got to have at least 2.5, but based on wetlands and roads and topography and things like that, you really can't ever really get to that yield. It ends up being more 3 to 4 acres per house. That's a whole different thing than when you're on the north side of 185th and you got 140 or 150 houses in a 40-acre section. So your ordinance may make a lot of sense up there, but I don't know that you can apply these things same way across 185th.
We don't know how many homes are going to be though that could access that trail and access that park. We don't know that yet.
You do. Yeah, you do know how many, because the zoning is 1 to 2.5, which yields like 1 per 3 or 1 per 4. So look at what's out there, and that's what it's going to be. There is no redevelopment that occurs. This is permanent rural residential. This isn't a ghost plat that city pipes coming through and we're going to do city neighborhoods later on.
Yeah.
The two are different. I think the ordinance perhaps makes sense north of 185th. This ordinance doesn't make sense south of 185th. Everybody loves Credit River. There's no trails in Credit River. There's neighborhood trails in the Territory and Monterey Heights and South Passage, but there's no trail system. So why are we creating one now? To get to a park that isn't there. And now if you say that the developer is going to have to, the homeowner is going to maintain it for the public, I ain't doing that. That's totally inequitable. I don't know if you can even force that.
I understand your point. Cindy, does it go through?
Does the trail go through?
the proposed one on the future plan.
Yeah, so on the Territory Fifth Edition final plat, which is expired, okay? It had the trail connecting on the road from this location in Territory. And that would have been constructed through here and then continue through to where it connects into the road that's shown on Mr. Feldman's plat. And then keeps going up. So that's one long contiguous roadway. It's not several different roadways with trails extended across, you know, where you're turning right, turning left. This is sort of the main corridor through the area that would provide access up to that park. So on the Territory Fifth plat, the trail was required. And yes, Mr. Kowalski has purchased it. He has made an application for a preliminary plat for part of the property. And you'll be seeing that at a meeting soon.
That help?
Yeah, anything else?
No, any question?
Any questions for that? Okay, thank you. Any other residents? Sure.
Hi, Commissioners. Scott Hutchinson, 20035 Nevada Avenue. I guess my question is probably at Cindy, as it kind of pertains to what's the future liability of the city when you look at Crestview, which started as an HOA and then was disbanded. If Mr. Feldman decided in the future, especially earlier in the stage, that he did not want to have an HOA and, you know, whatever sales you had and went to vote and it met the statutory obligations of it, what would happen to a trail system if it was abandoned by an HOA? No different, and I assume Mr. Feldman, to put you on the spot, your HOA was probably set up primarily for streetlights, maybe? I don't know your specifics. And maybe the common area at the monument, but on a very minimal basis. So if no different than Crestview, if those homeowners, or in Mr. Feldman case, if he as a developer changed that and we have this infrastructure, this trail, what would happen in that scenario?
You know, I wish I could answer that question. It's truthfully a little bit difficult to give a generalized answer to it because it honestly depends on exactly how those trails, what kind of land they're on, entitled on, et cetera, et cetera. So I really can't.
We all agree that the city is not requiring developers and developments to have an HOA. Is that correct?
That must be correct.
Yeah.
Generally, that's correct.
Yeah.
But if you have an item that needs to have maintenance, and it could be as simple as an entrance monument, we do want to see how that's going to be maintained by somebody.
But there could be, you know, Crestview, I think just top of the head would be the first example of a fair, well, that's 20 years old, but a development that started with an HOA, the homeowners disbanded that HOA. Now their improvements were specific to streetlights and stuff, so they didn't have sidewalks and paths.
Or a proposed park that's going.
Or a proposed park, yeah, but I'm saying statutorily, Mr. Feldman could, or the homeowners as a whole could disband that HOA in the future, correct?
I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, who and what is that? I assume, and Bob's not here, but I assume that would be a potential city liability, though, right?
Not, I really can't speak to what the city council would choose to do in those types of circumstances. I can give you an observation from my experience in other locations that in those situations where something like that does occur, and maybe there's something that, you know, inequitable that of what that neighborhood has that other parts of the city do not have, they tend not to take on those features, you know, such as maintaining streetlights or something like that.
Yeah, and like in Crestview's case, the homeowners came together and they're self-funding that without the HOA, but that's a very small cost structure. Self-funding an HOA path that doesn't exist would indirectly go to the city, especially if the city's I think the city's proposing this is a common walkway, right? This isn't gonna be exclusive. That's about subdevelopment, but it's gonna be paid for by the owners, the members of that neighborhood, correct? Right.
Cindy, do you know what it says in our comp plan related to that proposed trail? Like, is it specific on who owns it?
It's not really specific on who owns it. The comp plan is a guiding document. It's not, it doesn't get down into the weeds per se. Which is why you have things like search areas rather than specific parcels that something's going to occur on. So all that it says is that this is a planned local trail, given what the legend is here.
And then, like, as a plan, since they're set up and the preliminary plat had them on there, as far as the city's gonna require that HOA to clear them in the winter, or are they just gonna be vacated in the winter, or is that cost obviously gonna be at the burden of the HOA, I assume? Or the individual, I mean, is it gonna be treated like a sidewalk in the sense on a municipality basis? You are required to clear that sidewalk on your 72-foot lot in Lakeville or wherever you live, or is this?
Yeah, and that's,
Yeah.
yeah, great question. That's a level of detail at this point that is yet to be determined. So, for one, the city council left it open for this whole topic to be revisited by how they did the preliminary plat resolution. Two, the first question that would have to be answered is if they require the trail to be installed, would it be a city trail or would it be something that they'd want the HOA to maintain? And then from there, if it's a HOA maintained trail, we don't have any, we don't tell, for example, the territory how they have to maintain their trail. That's their improvements, that they're maintaining and taking care of. We don't tell them specifically that they need to plow it on a certain schedule or that they need to plow it at all, for example. If something's a city trail, the city would have a policy in terms of what types of maintenance it would do to its trails and when.
And I understand that, but this would be the first of its kind in Credit River on the basis of there has not been a trail system on anything that has low density being anything over 2.5 acres minimum, correct? Like this is the first of its kind.
That is my understanding.
Yeah.
And it's because of the proposed future park.
For the proposed future park. So we, as a city, we haven't gone down this road yet. Like I think
No, I don't believe so.
comparison to the.
Because you're comparing it, for example, to Crestview. Well, Crestview wasn't connected to a future park, so
No, the park part of it, but I don't know if we have 3 neighborhoods that we consider high density in Credit River, correct? Those 3 neighborhoods, I don't know if that would be a good comparison either though, right? Because you're dealing with a lot more densities in there in a very structured payment, right? I mean, you have a lot of members paying in and you're dealing with a completely different density structure. But I mean, to date, we haven't had a low density over 2.5 acre minimum trail system ever in Credit River.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we're out of order.
Okay.
Is anything else, Scott?
Nope. Thank you. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Greg Smith.
Why don't you just wait when you get up to the mic? That way you're recorded.
My name is Greg Smith. I'm 19923 Dakota Avenue. I'm concerned about it. On the map, it shows that that's hooking up to Dakota Avenue, and I'm not in favor of that at all.
Okay.
We like living on our dead end road. Not a lot of traffic, nobody comes down it. That's all I got to say.
All right, thank you, sir. Anybody else tonight that hasn't spoken, would you like? Yes.
Chairman, members of the planning commission, I'm Mark Seamers. Address 17350 Deerfield Drive Southeast. I used to live in the territory. I remember when I moved in, the budget line item for their trails was $30,000 a year. That's a lot of money.
Mhm.
And that is easily split, and I'm sure it's gone up since then. That's easily split amongst the 130 some odd homes in there. But that's a half acre to 3/4 acre lots. You take that same dollar amount, same amount of trails, and you try to divide that amongst 2.5 acre lots, it becomes very cumbersome for that homeowners association. Also, the liability becomes an issue. Territory carries liability insurance and it covers the trails. Again, it's spread out over 130 some odd homes versus a small number of homes. You're going to drive these HOAs out of the market. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Mark. Any other residents? Speak tonight. Ma'am, I know you already spoke. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, just a little. Okay, Lori Chenard again, 7409 Pine Tree Road. I was comparing it to Reverence, which is what we're talking about, the bigger lots with the small amount of homes. And they had to do the same thing. And they did a great job of it too. You can still go on the roads, but they did it around the park, kept them small. But they connect to our trails too. And our trails are long and theirs are very short. They just make them small around because I'm trying to think how many homes they have now. 10 maybe, but they started off with a very few. So that's what I would compare it to. And I think they wanted to do the same thing. So that's what I wanted you to compare it to. He was talking about there's large ones, but there is a small one reference.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you very much. Let me close the public hearing unless you have a,
Yeah, I'd like to take a comment.
okay, because go ahead.
So the trails there are two different trails here, the ones that in Reverence and whatever are in little areas of open space. They're not in front of $2.5 million houses. But we're being proposed on mine is to put a trail in front of these houses. That's the only place it can go. These trails will be flat in front of the houses, invading the people's privacy. And one more thing about homeowner association, my homeowner association for that development will not take care of a trail, or it's going to be a legal matter. That's all I got to say.
Okay. Thank you. Any other residents? Great. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion by Amy, is there a second? A second. Second by Thane. All in favor of closing the public hearing, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Commission members. Any comments, questions?
So Cindy, help me out with this future park. Is it gonna be on Bill's property or up on Dakota or where? Is everything north of Bill's is pretty much, well, it's either, $750,000 $1 million lots, and what's not is all wetland. So I don't really, where's the park gonna go?
Yeah, so great question. I don't have that map handy, but when we were before Bill applied for his first edition plat, we did have him look at a concept plan for all of the land that's in their family name, which includes all of this area as well. And so it was determined that the park would be up on this property.
So on Bill's property?
Yeah. Basically,
Yeah, just
quick, just north of where we're talking, but north a little bit more to the northeast of that.
right, just just west of the building, basically.
Straight south of the.
Cindy, question, was this trail discussed during the first edition of the ranch?
No, it was not, because the first edition of the ranch just comes in here off of 207th and wasn't going to impact where that trail was going to be. Because again, we already knew the corridor from Territory 5th of where the roads were going to align and come up. And their first edition preliminary plat and final plat didn't go into that area.
And presently, when we're kind of talking about our city ordinances, when it has to do with trails, as far as what would be considered an arterial path versus a feeder. And all of those things are kind of up for discussion, I would gather. If as far as maintaining it and who pays for it, if it's something that is a feeder to a main arterial trail that is going to a park. I mean, what I think you've talked about was that a lot of this stuff is up for, can be negotiated or not. I wouldn't say negotiate, that's probably the wrong term, at least discussed with the city council as we look at this ordinance, as it may need to change or not change moving forward. Is that correct? There is some open-ended to this at this point in time?
There's definitely some open-ended at this point in time. As discussed, the city does not currently have, say, an established network of city trails. So there also is not established maintenance policies and everything else that goes along with that. So this, a development in this location, because of what is shown on the future parks and trails map of the city, you know, is a catalyst for having that discussion.
So right now we're talking, what's in front of us currently is we're discussing the variance, to either approve or deny the variance for that path that the developer pays for that path.
No, that the developer installs it at all.
Okay, so it's just a matter of whether we're saying you need to or you don't need to.
It is, you know, and if you say you don't need to, that very well may preclude the trail from a feasible or practical perspective from being connected later.
And then it sets a precedent.
Right.
Cindy, if, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sure. Cindy, if these trails were forced or I guess have to be installed and HOA is developed, and as Mr. Hutchison mentioned, if that HOA were to be disbanded, the homeowner would have to maintain that trail. Question I have is, would that homeowner be now subject to additional liabilities if outsiders are using it and or like say somebody trips, falls, or it's not maintained properly and there's big potholes, or we've seen it during the collapse of the real estate bubble where houses were dilapidated and the driveways sink or something happens and it's a hazard, and then who pays for it, and the liability of it, I guess, is, have we seen this before, or because as we know, we're supposed to shovel our driveways for our mail carriers and whatever else, and I've heard of that when even people come to your door trying to solicit, they will, at one instance, this person slipped at my neighbors and wanted to sue them because they didn't, and they're trying to send them some religious stuff. But is that a thought or anything historically as far as this situation that it would put the homeowner in jeopardy?
I'm only hesitating because there's so many different ways that a trail can be installed in terms of ownership and on what land. In this case, we're talking about the trail being installed within the city right away. So it's not it wouldn't be on somebody's private property. Now, certainly that can be a risk and concern, and I'm sure that's why I say the territory HOA has liability insurance that covers those types of issues, among other things. So I think the bigger question is, for the city is a question of answering the variance that's been applied for, of do you require, do you find that there's a hardship in requiring that trail to be there? The second one is, if the city requires the trail, who's the appropriate entity to own and maintain the trail? And again, we're talking about a trail here that would be in the city right away in this case.
And how would you enforce that too? If, if one is failing and the neighbors are all complaining, and I mean, how would you enforce that homeowner? Would it be a citation and a limitation to get it fixed, or how would that be handled?
So I wouldn't, if it's a city trail, it wouldn't necessarily be a homeowner issue.
Right.
So I think there's just a bigger discussion that would have to occur there. So it makes it a really difficult question to answer speculatively.
So Cindy, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, do we have current precedent, and are we concerned about the potential to set precedent with this decision?
I would be concerned that, one, you're not following your comprehensive plan, and setting a precedent there. I'd be concerned that you're potentially, if you grant the variance, you'd be potentially cutting off the opportunity to install the trail later. And there won't be another corridor for that to occur within. Unless you required it to wind instead through the property that, through the road network that Mr. Kowalski would end up building with the Yellowstone, and then take a hard right and go east to get towards the park area. That would be your other opportunity, I suppose, to do that. But this is this is along Dakota, which is the primary corridor going from County Road 8 up through this part of the community and then up to where that park is. So it is the most logical place for this trail to occur. I'd be concerned with having, some of the logic of not requiring some of the ordinance required improvements to be constructed. For that to be a request that people would make in the future. For example, maybe somebody would want to make a variance request to not install the road infrastructure all the way to the edge of their plat or something like that, because maybe they don't need it at this point in time.
And, the comment was made about having two credit rivers. Talk to us about the practicalities or impracticalities of having different ordinances apply to north of County Road 21 versus south of County Road 21.
So you basically do already have in your ordinances some amount of that. Trying to find it. So for example, in part of the ordinance, it says this: in urban areas, and that would be the area basically north of 21, that sidewalks would be installed on one side of all local streets. And that would of course be ones that get installed at such time that you would approve a plat for a neighborhood that's on sewer and water up in that location. It's okay to have some different standards between different parts of the community. They're not necessarily, they shouldn't necessarily be treated exactly the same. And, but that said, within that equitable class of different areas and how you define that, you should, you should follow your ordinances and treat all of those properties the same. Treat everything in the north the same, and then treat everything in the south the same. But again, we have this bigger question here of, this is an identified corridor to get to that park search area and provide access to that park for various members of the community. On what is, a more prominent north-south through connector street in the future when everything's constructed eventually, and will collect traffic and people and take them through the area.
Cindy, talk to us about what the time frame is for the next comprehensive planning cycle.
So the next comprehensive planning cycle will start in approximately late 2025 when the Met Council issues what they call system statements to every community. And that tells us how many people we have to plan for in the next 2 decades after that. So in this case, it'll be through the year 2050. And other planning items that we have to consider. It could be items like these broad swooping trails for regional trails that you see here that show up in those regional system statements.
Mhm.
So that kicks off the cycle, and then we would have to have that next comp plan update done by 2028.
And is there an anticipated or hoped for time or planned for timeline with regard to creation of a park in that search area?
I don't think the city council has established a timeline. So we do look at, we include these park search areas within different parts of the community. And as those properties near those areas are being proposed for development, then we start to watch that a little closer, start to make some plans. And that's why when Mr. Feldman came in with this concept plan a couple of years ago, we did some very preliminary concept planning of how the whole road network there could lay out and where that park, might be in that area. And it was determined that it could, it can wait a bit because it's in a piece of property that Mr. Feldman wasn't developing yet.
Mhm.
But now, if Mr. Feldman came in 2 years and wanted to develop that piece of property, the city would have to make a decision at that point in time. And it's not necessarily to develop a park, but it would be, certainly to whether or not to preserve land for that park.
Thank you.
I'd love to make a comment.
Well, I'll allow it. Are you gonna comment on something that was just addressed?
It's just short, but so this so-called 10-acre park is on a ghost plat. This may not even be the way I develop that property. Who knows if there'll even be a park there?
Mhm.
This is 25 to 40 years down the road. It's not gonna come up in 2-3 years. It could be completely different. Here we're talking about a park that's not there, but was drawn on a piece of paper.
Understood.
So anyway, just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Bill, do you have something?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the whole park thing. So how big a park are we talking? This is like what kind of park are we talking about?
It is more of a community sized park. It's not a neighborhood.
Yeah, like slides for kids and all that.
Soccer fields or softball
Yeah.
fields. It's a larger park than.
Yeah, it would be something that more than people that lived in this neighborhood would use.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
So
Now what's in it, is definitely something that is not determined and wouldn't be determined until later.
okay.
So Cindy, under our current subdivision ordinances, a trail is required through the ranch.
Correct.
So if the variance is approved because the developer does not see whether it needs it or not, I think we have to be careful about who's, wagging the tail, what's going on here. And I think for us as a city organization with the planning commission and our city council, I think that's where this ordinance, if it needs to be looked at, then that is a separate and, motion that has to come up. And it may have to be, it may have to come in front of the city council. But I think what's in front of us right now is we have an ordinance in hand, and that ordinance requires a trail to be built. Now, if we deny, or if we deny this variance, it does drive the discussion probably about how does this trail system work and do our ordinances need to be looked at? But that's a separate conversation than what we have tonight.
I would agree. I'm where you're at. I see value in trails, but I hear both sides. we have ordinances on the books today. We need to follow the ordinances, but then also recommend to the city council to look at quite a few things. Do we really need a trail there? How do we pay for it? I think that's a big thing, because I tend to think that that's gonna be used by more residents than the 11 lot or whatever's in the second edition. To me, it's not fair for homeowners to pay for that when it's used by the city. So I think the city has to look at those things, and I think our ordinances have to change, but related to this application alone, we have to follow what's on the books today, and our ordinances require that, in my opinion, that we have to deny the request, but also recommend to the city to look at this and address it. And maybe we can work out an arrangement that's satisfactory to both Mr. Feldman and the city.
I think any developer coming before us, if I was the developer coming before us, I wouldn't want to put this in. I mean, but I'm the developer. I see, just as you said, I see the benefit in a trail system. I really do. Especially in the parks. I do. Now, again, we're talking with large acreage lots. It makes it a little harder, right? It does. But as far as kicking the can down the road, even if it is a ghost park, it's just an area identified. The fact is, our role here is to look at planning for the future.
Yeah.
We're not reacting to the present as much as we are planning to the future, because if we don't, and then all of a sudden, 10 years down the road, that park is really discussed and talked about, we're going to be a little late on trying to figure out how the path to get to it.
Right.
And so I think if the ordinance is on the books and this is what the ordinance says, then I think I would be with you, Bill, that, we do deny the variance. But with the same statement that I think if there's something brought before the city, it bears some real discussion as to how these trails are handled, not only for this development, Ted's development, or any development. And that's our role here. So.
I'll echo that. I don't see the variance as addressing the issues. I see both sides. I value trails. I know not everyone does. But as I'm looking at this and the issue that's before us, we have to take the current ordinance into consideration as the basis for making the decision, and whether practical difficulties exist in order to grant the variance. And as the staff have outlined, I'm not seeing that in this specific in this request for the variance. I do think, however, the broader discussion about who pays for them and maintains them and other facets are a good conversation for the city council to have. And I would strongly support a recommendation to look at that.
Can it be revisited if you change the
Oh,
ordinance?
just hang on, we got
We're pretty much done with
Public.
resident comments.
right now, we're just within the planning commission.
I guess how do you go ahead with it with so many questions? I guess nobody knows who's paying for it, how it's maintained, yada yada.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really
But
maybe
currently,
put a trail in and not.
we just have an ordinance that requires it. So I mean, right now, that's all we can actually.
Right now, the preliminary plan is approved on the condition that the homeowners association, first it gets built and then the homeowners association takes on the expense, and so that's what it is today.
Right.
And so the developer could do that if they wanted to, and there wouldn't be a need for a variance, but
What I hear being asked is that there's a change to the ordinance.
Yeah.
And that would be something that would have to be brought up separate from what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
So let's say the ordinance.
Let me-
gets changed.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Sorry if I can interrupt. I
Sure.
don't think for the discussion on whether and how trails are maintained by who, or, that type of question, I don't think there needs to be an ordinance change. It just has to be a discussion by the city council and a determination on whether they're willing to accept some of these trails as public trails instead. I think the ordinance provides for them to be either publicly owned and maintained or HOA maintained.
Is that a policy discussion then, or or does that require an ordinance?
It's not an ordinance, it's a policy discussion, and it's more of a maintenance and policy discussion.
Yeah, our ordinance today says trails may be either publicly or privately owned. So I think we just need to get city council.
Yeah, and I think you would probably, I would recommend you leave that language regardless of whether you think that a trail like this one should be publicly maintained. Because you could always have some developer proposing a high amenity package in a neighborhood, and you would not want to be taking over necessarily what are definitely internal trails serving a neighborhood or neighborhood parks within that neighborhood. That would be something that would be maybe inequitable to the rest of the city.
Hey, do you have anything? Oh, I think I'm good. Okay. All right, I'm gonna ask for a motion to two things, to deny the variance request submitted by the Rancho Credit River Second Edition to develop a subdivision without the inclusion of a trail. For the reasons we discussed tonight, as well as the reasons contained in Cindy's memo to us. But I'm also going to, within this motion, ask that the city, recommend to the city council that they address this specific trail. The plans for the park, talk about the plans for the park, and also talk about how the trail would be, who would pay for the construction, who would pay for the maintenance of the trail. So I think that needs to be part of the motion where we recommend to the city to talk about that with Mr. Feldman as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I think rather than kind of pick a developer to drive the conversation, I think it's a conversation that's much broader than that.
It is, but we don't have it in the comprehensive plan. We don't really have a lot.
Right, but I think it's not to pin it on Mr. Feldman, I wouldn't be the right verbiage. But I think no matter what it is, it just draws us into a larger conversation. And I think that's warranted. And whether it's driven by this particular project or the next one, whether it's Ted or whoever, I think it's just worthwhile to have that conversation. So I agree with you, Bill, that on the variance, approval or denial on that motion, it's just a matter of, the city council knows what we're asking them is to revisit this and look at the million questions that were brought up tonight.
Yep.
And it's something that we had leads to a broader discussion.
So is that a motion?
I will make that motion to deny the variance. And in a well, I don't know if that's part of a motion.
Well, we're gonna recommend to the city to.
Okay, then I'll make it as a separate motion that we, as a planning commission.
Let's do it two then.
You
We'll
want
just do it two.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a motion to deny the variance request. Is there a second?
No second.
Second by Amy. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, a motion is carried to recommend to the city council to deny the variance request. Now, can I get a motion to recommend to the city to address the issue of whether this trail that we're talking about and trails in general should be publicly owned, privately owned? How are they paid for? How we decide where to put it, what, those, and I don't know how. I want to frame that as a motion, but can I get a motion to have the city council, recommend the city council to talk about this issue?
I'll make that motion for the city council to further discuss our ordinance pertaining to trails within our city.
Okay, do I have a second? I'll second that. Second by Thane. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming tonight and talking about this important issue. With no other business before us, can I get a motion to adjourn tonight's planning commission meeting?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Cal, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Amy, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion is adjourned, or motion to adjourn is carried. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening. Thank you, Cindy. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Always a lot.
Um,